Welcome to Larry the Alchemist, and welcome to another edition of Dudes Talking Metal. It's been a while. I'm going to throw a dad joke out at you. It's been a year since I've seen you guys. But yep,
Yeah.
we're back. The dudes are back in town, and we have a fun topic for you here tonight. We're going to be giving you two concerts that we wish we could have been at, or even just sort of a general time frame if we could have seen a band during a particular era, a band with a particular lineup, or maybe a specific date. We're going to give you, we've got two of them each. At the end, we may do some honorable mentions. So the dudes in the house, we got Butch, we got Tony, we got Darren. All right, you guys ready to rock?
Yeah.
All
Ready.
right, how about we start with
Always.
Tony? What's your pick for a show you would have
Well,
liked to have been at?
yeah, I kind of got a feeling that a couple of us might have some of the same stuff here, but mine would definitely be the probably around 1978 lineup of Thin Lizzy, which that could have been Bravo on guitar, or it could have been Gary Moore, which I'd take either one, but probably would want to see him with the classic lineup with Bravo because he did more records with them. But yeah, the Live and Dangerous period, I would love to witness that. That would just be so spectacular to see. I don't know, maybe just like if I would have to go to like, England or somewhere to really
Mhm.
get the good vibe of the whole show. Cause I think every time they played over here, they were pretty much make like maybe an opening act, for Queen or someone. But I would love to see that lineup with Phil Lynott, Scott Gorham, Brian Robertson, and Brian Downey, just around that period of Live and Dangerous, Bad Reputation type period, like '78. That would be incredible to see. I just think that was Lizzie at their best and at their peak. And I did get to see some versions of Thin Lizzy later, but of course, by the time I really even got into the band, Phil had already passed away, and they were done. They had broken up, of course, a couple years before that. I did see some versions in the early 2000s. John Sykes fronted band with Scott Gorham, and I did see the versions with when Brian Downey toured in I think it was 2011 um, with Ricky Warwick fronting along with Scott Gorham and some other guys. But yeah, that it was a cool tribute, but it wasn't the same as seeing the actual band that I love so much. So yeah, the '78 period, Thin Lizzy would be my first choice.
Nice. Yeah, very cool.
That's a
Darren?
good one.
Okay. I'm going to go with, I'm going to be specific about this. This is Kiss, 1975 on the Alive tour, December 12th, Syracuse, New York, the Onondaga War Memorial Auditorium.
What seat would you
Uh,
have been sitting in?
I would have been sitting in the first row, dead center. I'd have had
Yeah,
blood and all kinds of crap all over me.
confetti,
Uh,
popcorn, everything.
that's my favorite era of Kiss. I mean, 1975, the black and silver era, before things got a little bit too show busy, where we're still kind of gritty and dark. Yeah, I've always wished I could have been old enough to have seen Kiss like that. You see the video from Cobo Hall on the video, like the one of the Kissology videos and stuff like that, and it just
Mhm.
looks so cool. So that would have been a concert that I would have really liked to have been a part of, because also we would have Rush opening on the Caress of Steel tour. And then the headliners for that particular show would be Black Sabbath on the Sabotage tour.
Whoa.
It'd be a killer show.
Oh, wow.
That's
Absolutely,
that's
it
my
would
number
be.
one.
Yeah.
We usually go in descending order, but this is my number one. This would be a show to die for. I mean, how
Wow.
awesome would that be?
So
Nice
Yeah.
Kiss
pick.
is opening for Sabbath at this show. So it's
Yeah,
Rush, Kiss,
both
then
Rush,
Sabbath.
Kiss, and Sabbath. Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, that's a
And
stacked
it would
bill.
A
Yeah.
killer.
That's a good pick. I just assumed that one of you three guys would pick Kiss for your thing. So I didn't pick any Kiss. But all right, Butch, go ahead.
All right. I'm gonna go specific to April 18th, 1986, Stabler Arena, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Ozzy Osbourne on the Ultimate Sin tour, but I don't give a shit about missing that set as much as I love Ozzy. What I do give a shit about is missing Metallica, Master Puppets tour, Cliff Burton on bass. Cliff died in the fall. They never came back. It was my only chance. The only chance I would have had to see them. I had friends that went to the show and were raving about it. I'd been a fan for a couple years at that point, and I can't remember why I missed it. But I did, and it is a date that will live down, that will go down in infamy because I never got to see the band with Cliff on bass. And as many times as I saw him a bunch of times, and nothing against Jason, but there would have been something I think about seeing that lineup.
Yeah.
Still,
I was killer.
hungry and vicious with Cliff, just to see Cliff, like his whole, you see it on videotape, but to have seen his whole persona in person, I just think would have been, it's something that I really, of the shows that I missed in the 80s, that's the one I am probably the most sad about.
And there's something about a band when a band is pushing their way to the top when they're young, they're hungry, they're just living for it. There's just something about that. And I mean, Master of Puppets, they're getting there. They're there, basically, but they're young, they're hungry. They just have that energy. So to see a band like
Yep.
during that phase, I think is something really cool.
I saw him on the Ride Lightning with Wasp and Armored Saint, and prior to that, I was familiar with him, but I was mostly going to see. Well, pretty much there to see all three bands, but I was really into Wasp. I thought Wasp was really cool. Um, I left totally enamored with Metallica. I mean, we were at the Tower Theater in Upper Darby. We pushed our way up to the front. Maybe there was like a few people in front of us, but we were so close at the end of the set, everybody came out and they were like shaking everybody's hands. I still remember like Cliff coming, well, we were on Cliff's side anyway, and him reaching down and shaking Cliff's hand, which at the time to me wasn't that big of a deal, but now in retrospect, it was a huge deal. But that was like, it was life changing for me because that was my first experience with a band that was, like a real heavy metal band like that didn't dress up, that weren't wearing, some kind of glitter or something. I mean, this is like
Mm-hmm.
1985, and we are sort of working our way out of that era. But I mean, after that, I mean, I was just like getting into stuff that was similar to Metallica, looking for things like Anvil, Exciter, all the Motley Crue and the Rat, and that sort of fell to the wayside after that show. It was really life changing. And then I saw him on Master of Puppets, and it was in a large arena. Went from like the smaller venue, but a nice venue like the Tower Theater, and then it went to Philadelphia Spectrum, which was a much larger arena. And it was kind of strange seeing Metallica in that environment because they're such an intimate band. I mean, they're in your face, at least at that time. And to see them on like that big stage in an arena opening for Ozzy, it was a different dynamic, but it felt kind of triumphant, because it was like, this is our band. This is like a band of the people, and they're doing
Exactly.
it and they're
Yeah.
making it. They got
Yeah.
they're in an arena, so it was really cool. So I guess of the two, yeah, you're right, Butch. That probably would be a pretty significant one to see. I
Yeah.
mean,
By
it was a
by
great
then
show.
they had the backdrops and the
Yeah.
The
crosses on stage.
crosses.
So yeah, I
Yeah.
saw the August 3rd on 1986 show opening for Ozzy. I went in April of '86 to see the show in Hampton, Virginia, and we get there and the marquee says show has been postponed to August 3rd. So we it's like sucks, But me and a buddy of mine went back and it was like we went and it was a killer show and it was the last US show before they were going to Europe. And it was James's birthday. That show's recorded. It's in the Master Puppets box set, that particular show. But it was James's birthday, and he had a cast, and he had John Marshall playing guitar, so they were a 5-piece, and Ozzy and Jake and a bunch of roadies were like out there throwing stuff, and it was just playing jokes on it because it was the last Metallica date for the tour. Phil Suzanne actually told me once that they offered Sharon had spoken to him about them continuing on with some more dates with them, and they said they couldn't because they had to go to Europe. They already had this tour booked, and he said he's often wondered, if they had
Mhm.
accepted those dates, would Cliff still be with us?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
Were
just
they
one of
headlining
those
when?
what if.
Yeah, when you saw them, Darren, on the Ride Lightning, were they headlining that show?
No, Wasp was headlining, but they
Yeah,
switched off, from what I understand. But no, Wasp headline.
and I think
That
one
would
of
have
the
been a
things
great
about
show.
yeah, and one of the things about Metallica, you mentioned like when they got bigger, it was they were doing it against different than the way everybody else was doing it. They didn't have any videos on MTV. I mean, when you
Oh,
think about it, when did Master of Puppets come out? 85, 80, 86 or whatever?
84,
Yeah,
84.
Yeah, 84. I mean, that was when MTV was just exploding. Like you mentioned, the hair metal bands, the LA bands, and Metallica didn't have that, and they were really going against the grain. So
it was
you're right.
very
Yeah,
grassroots with them because it was kind of word of mouth and magazine articles. People would that's
yeah.
the only way you saw Metallica was in magazines.
Yeah, they weren't
I
getting
mean,
played on the radio.
M-
They weren't.
MTV were doing. They did do like some little interviews with them. Like I was watching a repeat I found on YouTube the other night of the original Headbangers Ball, and it was called Metal Mania, and it
Mhm.
hosted by D. Snyder, and they
Yeah,
went on the road with Metallica, and when they had this whole little piece on Metallica that they showed, and it was pretty cool.
awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, for me, Ozzy's name's been mentioned here. I'm a huge Randy Rhoads fan, so I would have liked to have seen them when they were still calling themselves the Blizzard of Oz, when it was Bob and it was Lee. And early on, there's some bootlegs for them, like Chemsfield Odeon, I think is one of them. There's a couple
Mm-hmm.
bootlegs from that era. They played small clubs because they were almost like sort of they were like test runs. They were just getting the band up and running and stuff. I would have loved to have seen that era of the band with Bob and Lee because they never came over to the US. And I mean, I was too young at the time, anyways. I wouldn't have seen them, but they never came over to the US. Young Randy Rhoads, new material. Crazy Train isn't the hit song that it is today. Ozzy doesn't know if this is going to work. Nobody knows if it's going to work. They were still playing stuff like You Looking at Me, Looking at You live. The songs, if you hear them from that very early era, those couple of boots that exist, Randy's solos are slightly different. Kind of, the band has a different feel to it because it's Lee on drums and Bob on bass and everything. So it just would have been a really cool time to catch that band, to catch one of my favorite guitar players before everything broke big for them.
Oh,
That
absolutely.
was on
Yeah,
my
that's a
list.
good pick, man.
Oh, was
My
it?
next one,
Mm-hmm.
Chelmsford. Yeah,
That
yeah, for
is-
sure. That's a good pick. Great
yeah,
pick.
that's a good
That's a
bootleg too.
that's
That's
a
a really
good
good.
show for bootleg. It really is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It's a
That was good.
good quality show.
Mhm.
All right, who do we start with? Tony, right?
Tony.
Okay, so my second pick, I'm gonna pick Leonard Skinner around 1976 when Steve Gaines had joined the band and went back to
Nice.
a triple lineup. Because I've
Great.
only ever seen the versions of Skinner, that reformed in the late 80s or whatever. But I would love to see the original band with Ronnie Van Zant fronting. It's Ronnie Van Zant's birthday today, actually, on this day that we're actually taping
Mhm.
here. But yeah, that would have been amazing. You got Ronnie on lead vocals, Artemis Powell on drums, Billy Powell on piano, and then you had Gary Rosington, and Alan Collins, and Steve Gaines on guitar. And Street Survivors was getting ready to come out. They had the live album. That would have just been amazing just to see that lineup perform because everybody says if any of the documentaries you watch said they were a force to be reckoned with. I mean, they basically blew the Rolling Stones off their own stage. They that whole footage of when they were opening for the Stones at that stadium, and they told Ronnie, "Don't go out on the catwalk," and he still went out on the catwalk. And which was a giant Stones,
hmm
lips and tongue is what there was the replica
Yeah.
of the stage was. And man, I could just imagine just how it would feel just to see them in concert with that lineup.
Yeah.
It'd just be amazing. Yeah, because they were a really, really just great band at that period for
Nice.
sure.
Sure.
This is
That would have been
Nice.
yeah.
awesome.
Darren?
I'm gonna go with the original Alice Cooper band. Um,
Oh, that's a good one.
1973, it doesn't really matter where. I could have taken the show anywhere on that tour. But the original band, Michael Bruce, Neil Smith, Dennis Dunaway, Glenn Buxton, of course, Alice Cooper, Vincent Benet, I don't know how you say his name. But it would have been amazing. It's when the theatrics, they had enough of a budget where the theatrics were really a little bit more extravagant than they had been in the past. And um, great album to support. I would have loved to have been there and witnessed that firsthand. It'd been cool, but
Nice.
too young.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it would have
Yeah.
been amazing to see for sure.
And that's with a lot of these picks. This is before film footage back in that era is really, really rare. So that's sort of another thing too, that to be able to see some of these bands because it's not like today or even by the time you get to the mid 80s where there's a fair amount of bootleg footage of a lot of bands. When you get back into the 70s, it's slim pickings for any kind of footage. But
Hmm.
I remember seeing they had footage from I guess it was the Billion Dollar Babies tour. It eventually came out as that Good to See You Again movie, but it
yeah,
was
Yeah.
I had a bootleg of it way back. It was just to see that tour, with that lineup. And Michael Bruce actually in 1995 he did some shows down here in North. He was living in North Carolina at the time, and he did these shows at his local club. And he comes back over to my friend's house afterwards. We're over there partying, and I bring that video out, and we're sitting in there watching it with Michael Bruce, and he's
Oh
pointing
man,
out like
it's
he's going
surreal.
like he's like, you see those lights up there? Those lights would never work. They would always go out. He's just telling us stuff, and I'm thinking, this is the guy that wrote this. This is the guy in the video. And he's telling us this stuff.
yeah,
He was just so
that's
down to
awesome.
earth. Just a cool guy, man. He really
oh,
was.
awesome, man.
Great
Yeah.
story.
That's so cool.
All right,
I
Butch,
think it
what's
would
your
have
second?
been real quick. I think it would have been shocking to see the band back then, especially on the Killer tour. There was a guy
Yep.
named Dewey that used to work at Jerry's Records here in Pittsburgh. Here, I talked to him all the time when I was a kid, and go in there and talk to him about bands. And he told me that when they did the different ways that they would kill off Alice at the end, he said the hanging thing they did on the Killer tour. He said it was one of the scariest things he's ever seen in person in a show. I think that would have been wild. Any of those tours would have been great, but to see that there's video of it out there, but it never does it justice. Like the way it probably would have looked in person. I think it would have been massive to see.
Yeah, those
But
videos are always so dark. They're so dark you
yeah,
really can't see a lot of the
Yeah.
details in them. Yeah.
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 All right, so my next pick, it comes as a surprise to no one that knows me. The thing about missing bands that is a bummer, especially a lot of the bands I wanted to see are bands I was too young to see in the 70s. So bands like Thin Lizzy and Kiss and these bands, at least there's pretty good footage of most of them to kind of like soothe it. The one that bothers me the most is not getting to see Angel in 1977 on Earth as It Is in Heaven tour, or 78 White Hot when they had the whole show going for years. The only info I had about it was what I'd read, the descriptions of it, a couple of still photos here and there, the whole thing with the beginning of the show, the roadies coming out and building the boxes up, and then you had the Ben-Hur theme going in the background, and that voice booming introducing each band member, and then as the boxes are built, then the tracer lights come on as the band members introduced, and they like just like appear in the box like out of nowhere. And then in mid-show, the hologram behind them comes up, and that the Angel logo comes up and starts talking to the crowd. And at the end, there's a box that comes down with the logo on it. I think supposedly they had it sometimes that there was a large album cover reproduction on it. They'd get inside this box, it would go up in the air and explode, and they were gone for the night. Like,
Wow.
it's like stuff like you hear about it. When I heard about it when I was a kid, I was obsessed with it. I'm like, oh my, I would have killed to have seen that show. And there's some video that over the last, I don't know, 8 years or something like that, there's some video from the Warner's Theater in California, like 8 millimeter kind of stuff that did get out. It looks okay, but the problem is you don't get the whole effect at the beginning because you don't see the thing that was, I guess, that made that trick at the beginning really work is that the stage was bare and there's all these cubes scattered all over the stage, and then the roadies would come out and start stacking them. We don't see that part in the video, so you just see like the boxes with the track lights in them, and the dudes like step out of it. But man, that would have been. I just think to see the show would have been great. And I lean towards 77, the On Earth as It Is in Heaven tour, because they were still playing a lot of songs when they headlined places like Cleveland. They were still playing a lot of songs from the first couple records. As the years went on, less songs were coming from the first two, and they were focusing more on the White Hot record and stuff from On Earth as well. But they were still playing, some of the heavier ones and more progressive stuff that I like on those first couple. I like all their records, but man, that's like if they ever found great footage, they'd shot a movie that was Casablanca was going to put out called Angel at Midnight, but it never got finished. It never got edited together, and then it got lost. Uh, so that footage is gone forever. Probably, I know those guys have tried to find it. They have a documentary coming out about the band. They did find pieces of footage. I think similar to what I think they have several openings and a couple of like different spots in the show, but there's never been a full show found.
Wow.
And all the audio bootlegs from back then are pretty dire in terms of sound quality. There's a couple of good ones, but most of them are mid. Like there's like three from Japan, the one country that they went to outside the U.S. that got the whole show.
Yeah.
So
You never know what'll pop up. For those who are interested in subjects like this, there's a Zeppelin podcast called Zepp Fan, where they just interview fans and people who maybe worked for the band, things like that. And there's an interview with a guy who had the Royal Albert Hall footage, and this is professionally shot footage that people had only heard rumors might have existed. And I won't get into it here. If you're interested in this type of thing, you should listen to the
What year?
podcast and listen to what this guy went through to get the footage, what he went through to be able to release the footage and working with Led Zeppelin and negotiating
What
with, I mean, it's fascinating.
what year
Wow.
was it?
So that was, what was that Royal? It was them. I think it
Six,
was like,
69,
yeah,
70?
maybe it was, them kind
wow.
of at their peak. They eventually released it and they have like a DVD set that they released years ago, and
They probably played the Royal
Oh
Albert Hall
yeah,
a few.
it's on that set. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, that's where that came from. And this guy talks about how nobody knew where that footage was. It was some amateur filmmaker that convinced Led Zeppelin to let him film on his own dime. He paid for the lights, the film. He had this. Zeppelin never used it. He never used it. It got passed on to various people. Eventually, it lands in this guy's hands. There's all kinds of legal things that this guy has to go through because even though he owns the video, he does not own the audio. Jimmy Page had a professionally recorded audio of the
Hmm.
show, so he can't release the footage unless he gets Led Zeppelin's permission. He can't do anything essentially with it. He can release it as like a silent thing and he mentions how he does that, how he sold 10 seconds of this clip, 10 seconds of that clip to like the BBC to use for documentaries, but he couldn't like use any audio with it. He owned the film, he didn't. So it's like you're sort of at a stalemate. Zeppelin can't
Yeah.
use the film
Yeah.
because they don't own the film. So he gets into this big
Wow.
negotiating thing, and he eventually talks about how he lands in a room, a tiny room where they have to rent a this is in the 90s, like at this point, they have to rent a projector that can project these like 14 canisters of film that he has. And he's sitting like in a tiny room with all the guys in Led Zeppelin plus John Bonham's sister, because apparently everybody has to be, they all make a equal decision on stuff like this. And Zeppelin
Wow.
says, well, we're not going to buy this off of you unless we can watch it and make sure that it's not damaged or it's the original, so that's how they solve this. They sit in a room together he sits in a room with Led Zeppelin, and for
Wow.
2 hours, they watch this Royal Albert Hall footage, and eventually they make him some kind of offer that he can't refuse, and he sells the stuff to them. But first he gets
Yeah, yeah.
bullied and he has lawyers calling him, we're suing you and all this other stuff. And he has to go to court and it turns into this. It's fascinating. Zepp fans, listen to it if you're into that. Wonder why sometimes there's footage out there and you think, why doesn't this get released? Well, a lot of times it's just so bogged down in red tape and copyrights and who owns what and stuff like that. That's what happens to this stuff. So, all
I
right.
There's
must, I
Well,
must add,
definitely
I must add, if Peter Green was still alive, he'd have just beat him up and took it from him.
probably, right? All right. Well, this is a good segue into my second pick. All right. This is maybe
I said Peter Green. I meant Peter Grant.
Peter
But
Gray.
yeah,
Yeah.
Peter Grant.
yeah.
Yeah, he was a tough rascal, man. I tell you, scary,
There's a
Great
great
dresser though.
yeah.
snazzy.
Yeah, certainly you don't want him mad at you, but all right, so this is a good segue into my second pick. Maybe this is cheating a little bit, but it's my show. I can cheat. uh, I would have liked to have been when Pink Floyd recorded at Pompeii. Now, I know there was no
Oh,
audience there, but I would have liked to have maybe been like the dude who has to sweep up in the Coliseum or something, and I'm just there while they're filming this because I love that film. I've watched that just so many times. And I know there's not an audience there, but I just would have loved to have been maybe the guy that's holding the light or something like that, and to
be the
just say
best
like,
boy.
yeah,
Grip.
I was the
Yeah.
gaffer. I was the gaffer.
Yeah, for
Really?
Just to say I was when Pink Floyd was at Pompeii, I was there.
that would have
Cool.
been
Yeah,
amazing. That
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 would have
show
been
was
amazing.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
All right. If we have some honorable mentions, why don't we do a quick go around and give us some of your almost made it on the lists, Tony?
Oh, Kiss, of course. I would love to see Kiss around the Love Gun period. That would have been amazing to see. Also, I'm a big fan of Triumph. I never got to see Triumph, and if I could
Oh
pick a
man.
time period, maybe '82 Allied Forces, like that Baltimore show that's was shown on MTV. That would have been really cool to
Yeah.
see. I love the stage show where they just had the white lights that were just around the stage and all around the amps and the triumphant lights. It was just really neat looking, for not like crazy, moving lights, and it was very, very kind of primitive the way they had it set up, but it looked so cool. So definitely Triumph. But yeah, that's just two right off the top of my head. I mean, there's bands I never got to see that love. April Wine's another one. I'd love to see April Wine at some period, maybe during the Nature of the Beast period. That would have been really cool to see.
Nice. Darren?
I would have liked to have seen Dio with Rainbow, the Rising tour. I think that would have been pretty awesome. I've never seen Rainbow. I've seen Dio plenty of times, but I would have loved to have seen Blackmore and Dio on the same
Ooh,
stage, supporting Rising, or maybe even Long Live Rock and Roll. I mean, just
Yeah, that would have.
Dio and Blackmore would have loved to have seen that for sure. And I'm going to add one more. Um, I just missed the 1981 show when Ozzy came to the Tower Theater. In fact, that was kind of how I got turned on to Ozzy, was hearing the radio advertisement for that concert. But I would have loved to have seen Ozzy, even though it wasn't with the original Blizzard of Oz band. It was with Randy, you know, um, and Motorhead opening. I've seen Motorhead a bunch of times. I've never seen Motorhead with Fast Eddie Clark. So that would have been a pretty
yeah.
killer
That would have
show
been
to
great.
see.
Yeah, for sure.
Ozzy, Randy, even though it was with Rudy and Tommy, it would have been with Randy, and then opening the show would have been the classic three-piece Motorhead lineup. I would have loved to have seen that. So those are my two honorable mentions.
Nice. Butch?
Nice. Thin Lizzy was actually on my list. So really any lineup from I know I would have liked to have seen any tour really from the lineup with Robbo and Scott on guitar. So any of the tours from Fighting up through bad reputation. Black Rose would have been cool too, but I really love those three, those records in the middle there with Brian and Scott together. Um, but Beggars Can't Be Choosers, any era of Thin Lizzy back then would have been cool. Rainbow with Dio, especially when they were still playing A Light in the Black live. Um, Sabbath in their heyday would have been great. Kiss in their heyday would have been, 75, or Hotter Than Hell or Dress to Kill tour, Love Gun tour. I don't care. Any of those would have been great. I missed Dio twice at the Stabler Arena in Bethlehem on the Sacred Heart tour with that huge show with the dragon, and I
Yeah.
missed him. He had Accept and he had Rough
Well,
Cut.
twice on that tour.
Yeah, I get to see him even once. I missed both shows somehow.
It's
Uh,
good.
I don't know. And then, like, I always, for whatever reason, I have this romantic idea that it would have been cool to be at Woodstock, and be like getting down with Sly and Family Stone, and that set is incredible, and Mountain laying it down, and just all
Yeah.
those bands and that whole, even though it was dirty and muddy, and I don't know, there's just something about it that I'm like, oh, that probably would have been
Yeah.
pretty rad to have been there. But there's a ton. I could go on forever, so I'll just leave it at those.
Nice. Okay, I've got a couple. I mean, I assumed that you guys were going to mention Kiss. I would have liked to have seen them on the Alive 2 tour. I had an uncle that said he saw AC/DC when they first came over to him. He didn't know, but I'm guessing from the time frame he said it was like on their first US tour, and he said he saw them in a small club and there was like 50 people there, and he said Angus came out into the crowd and was like stood on the table in front of him and was going crazy. I would have liked to have been at that. Hendrix
Yeah,
at Monterey, 6/18/67. Comes back, sort of his triumphant return to home. That's where he burns the guitar on stage. Black Sabbath before they released the first album. So I just went with the Dumfries show, which is 11/16/69. So then I could say there's a recording of this show, and I was at this show when they were playing stuff from the first record, but they were also doing a lot of blues jams and stuff like that because it just would have been fun to see them in that phase. And then last, I would have liked to have been at the Freddie Mercury tribute concert because I think a lot of the acts rose to the occasion for that. And I just think the mood at Wembley Arena, I believe it was, would have been pretty special. And I like Freddie Mercury, so being able to be there at that would have been awesome. So. All right, well there you go. I think we had a lot of. We just need a time machine, and we're good to go with
Okay.
all this. All right. So
One little
everybody,
detail to sort out.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, everybody had a lot of good picks. Let us know what you think of our picks. Let us know some concerts, shows you would have liked to have been at, eras of a band you would have liked to have seen live. Let us know in the comments down below, and we'll see you at the next Dudes Talking Metal.